Well, another episode of Workshop Diaries, I guess. So today we have got this beautiful Mk2 Golf Driver in. Absolutely lovely colour. 1.6 driver, like I said. Nice big Weber Carb on it. Got a few things to look at. Firstly, this water pump. It is noisy, and if you can just look closely, fair bit of movement in that. So that'll be the first port of call to check that. But yeah, this car is lovely. Nice big Weber Carb, 32-34 carb. Needs a few tweaks to get it running nicely. A couple of valves have been bypassed. It was an auto. It's now a manual. So there. Yeah, this paint colour is beautiful. 56,000 miles too. Very low mileage car. And it shows it. Look at this interior. Literally like brand new. So first point of call is water pump. So on a Mark IIs, you can take the pump off the side and change that, but just get the whole lot off. You've got a thermostat to change as well, because if you're doing a water pump, do the thermostat. No-brainer. So that's quite awkward. So just take the whole lot out, then we can get it in the garage and see what we're dealing with. So it's off on the bench. Listen to the noise of this. That shouldn't sound like that. That's called a dry bearing. Well past it. Considering it's 56,000 miles, it's probably the original one. Most likely the original one. It is a VW part. Just try and get it in a position where here you go. See that? Yep, too much movement on that. So, new pump installed, thermostat installed, all bolted on, tightened up. Now, I was just about to top that up until I looked at the side of the head. Now, if you remember from my last video, one of the flanges, same sort of culprit on this one. Loads of silicone. You don't need it. I mean, look at the state of this. What is that? It's like a floppy gherkin. And then the O-ring, which is, you'll see in a minute, pretty flat. Again, all that, just need to clean it all up, get that nice and flat. So this is the old O-ring put in, then you can see the gap between the ruler and the housing is not that big. New O-ring in there, you can see you've probably doubled the distance, so you've got a lot more sealing pressure. There we go, that's on. Cleaned up the surface on the head and the back. New O-ring, tightened up, perfect. So what are we in today? Mark II Driver, 1.6. This thing is beautiful. I absolutely love this colour. The interior, geez, 56,000 miles. It's not, well, there is a spot on it, but you know what I mean. Well looked after. Pheasant, stay. Yeah, so we've got this in for the health check and a once over. The water pump was making a horrid noise, as you've heard and seen, so I didn't want to take it out for a drive to see what it's doing until I've done that. So I've done that, thermostat's on there. Again, if you're doing a water pump on a Mark II, just pull the whole lot off, do the thermostat, do it all, so it's all done. It's more awkward to change the side than it is the whole unit. So the whole unit, you've got one main seal that goes in the block. That's off, you can clean both surfaces up, new seal on there, perfect, not loads of silicone. Get the thermostat on there, sat nice and easy, it's very awkward. Job's good. So that's all done, thermostat's working fine. I did get a fill up with coolant, as you can see, the flange on the side of the head, someone had been there with some silicone sealant. And the seal was very flat, not much gap in there to seal it. So we changed the seal on that, cleaned it all out, done. Yeah, working up temperature, thermostat opens beautifully. So now we just want to see, there's a few running problems. Starts up on the button pretty much, but as soon as you touch the throttle, it chokes itself. Now this is a 1.6 driver and it's got a 32-34 DTML Weber Carb. The same Weber Carb I had on my 1.3 driver years ago. So it's a very good carb, but there's it only takes a couple of vacuum hoses, a leaking gasket, not for it to run right, or not set up right. So yeah, as soon as you start it from cold, as soon as you touch the throttle, it tries to drown itself and conk out. It's the first time I've actually used a choke on a car in a long time. For those of you who don't know, a choke is another accelerator cable you pull on the dash down here on a carb, an older car, carbs generally. just to pick the revs up so they don't conk out. Bit of an exhaust mode, I don't know if you can hear it, but the owner is getting the exhaust done soon, so I'll leave that to him. It's just had new suspension put on it. Can't remember which ones, but I think it's the EBAC kit a lot of people go for. It's a really good all-round kit. Handles really nice, really does. It's a bit wallowy the front end, but he hasn't had the wheel alignment done because he knew it was coming to me. And if it needs track rod ends, etc., then you sort of throwing money down the drain doing a wheel alignment, then getting the track rods changed because you'll have to have it checked again. So it's pulling a bit. So some corners you turn right, it's all right. You turn left, it's quite quick to turn left, which could be a ball joint, or that could just be the tracking out. So you're holding the steering wheel straight. As soon as you go left, it could be towing out to the left. So as soon as you go left, it's happily already there. Again, we're just going to take it out, feel how it's driving, hear for any knocks, bangs, use the bum dyno to see what the engine's pulling like. Performance wise, it's not bad for 1.6. Yeah, the owner said between 2 and 4,000 RPM. It's a bit gutless, and it is. 2,000 RPM now, 5th gear down out. Yeah, as soon as it gets to about 3 and a bit, it starts picking up. That could be timing, that could be fueling, but again, we'll go through it. Could be vacuum advance you got on these because it's a carb, 8 valve, even a GTR's thing. You got a vacuum advance on the distributor, which means that a certain engine vacuum that's been drawn in, normally when you put your foot down or blah blah blah, it causes a vacuum and advances the ignition, and that's bit. So if that vacuum pipe's leaking or the ignition time is out anyway, when it does advance the timing from the vacuum, it could be doing it wrong. So again, it's all things we'll sweep through the engine, vacuum hoses, gaskets, things like that. I'll settle the timing up static, see where it is, and then adjust it as necessary to get it spot on, and then we'll focus on things after that. A nice strategic pattern to work through the engine so everything's covered. Real wheel bearings then. So we've got the car jacked up and we've got our dial gauge on there. So the weight of the vehicle's on the jack, the wheels on the floor, and we've got the gauge set up as best as we can just to give us a good indication of what we play. Now this is the rear, as you can see. That's far too much movement for a wheel bearing. So we do pull it off and adjust it. Now this is after. Just a little flicker from the dial. And that's done. So the backs are both done. The front is off now. Wheel bearing's good. It looks like it's done recently. Track rods look a bit scabby in a way, but they're solid. Lower ball joints have been done recently as well, so it's been looked after. This is a suspension that's put on it. It's really nice. But one thing you notice is there's a bit of a gap down there, and there's an empty hole. Now these don't have anti-roll bars from factory, so anti-roll bar would go on the lower arm, follow that round, and fill up that gap there. So it's why these drivers can feel a little bit wallowy, because they haven't got an anti-roll bar fed, and you can quite easily fit one off a GTI just to give it a bit more handling improvement. So that's the driver's side done. We're in the same sort of condition we are the passenger side. Parts have been changed, there's no play in them, just a bit wobbly. We have got a bit of backlash in the gearbox, but there's no noises when you're driving it, so there's no problems, nothing to worry about. Last thing to do, torque the wheel nuts up, because we don't want wheels falling off when we're driving down the road. So on to the next bit, inlet manifold. Now there's a bit of oil build up around here, so we've cleaned it all off. The inlet manifold gas is actually pretty strong, because there's a bit sticking at the end, so you can give it a wiggle and get a good indication of how strong it is. So the earth point's been cleaned up on there. I've cleaned all the rock cover edge and tightened up the bolts because they were very loose. I've taken that gasket off and checked it, and it's pretty strong, so we don't need to replace that. I've resealed those parts, ready for the carb to go back on. So the carb's back on, we've resealed that bit, the adapter and the main gasket for the carb, so they're all sealed up, happy with that. What we've done as well is replace that vacuum line and that vacuum line, because the old ones were shot. Now these are the old ones. Now you can blow through it and it doesn't leak, but what you need to understand with the vacuum pipe, it's vacuum, so when they're all soft like that, when you get a vacuum on it, it closes up and then you don't get the vacuum you need. So they can sort of go two ways. The earth was loose on there and the cable was a bit past it, so we've put a new earth cable on there, nice and tight onto where it should be. Throttle cable's been adjusted just to give it a bit more responsiveness. So all the airbox back on. We've replaced the vacuum line from the distributor as well, because again that was about 4 meters too long and past it. So now what we need to do is check the timing. So static chart timing, you've got your distributor and your TDC mark. So you've got a dot down there that is Tipex, but we won't pay too much attention to that. But that's a good indication of where TDC is. But what you want to be looking at is the distributor. There is a little mark on the housing, same as the 16 valves. Little line indent there. The rotor arm needs to point towards that. Don't worry if it's not bang on, as long as it's pointing towards it, you're in the right ballpark, and then we can start tweaking later on. Now the main bit you need is the awkward bit down there. That's quite hard to see. That little blue dot is TDC, top dead center. That's what you want to look at when you're doing timing. That's your first focus point. Find TDC on there, because it's metal, it doesn't move. It is very awkward to see. There is a tiny pointer on the gearbox inside. Quite hard to see, but it is there. So now we know the static timing is good, we can then move on to ignition timing. Now ignition timing on this, the 30mm bolt on the distributor, so it can be turned. The vacuum pipe stays on the 1.6 engines, carbs. Some take them off, these need to stay on. Then we're looking for the TDC marker in there with our timing gun. So the timer gun I use is Aki Spark, really good bit of kit. Switch it over there, shows you what your ignition advance is. Obviously we don't want it like that, so you can adjust it up and down where you want it. And you're pointing that down in the hole, in there, and when it flashes you're looking to line up there's a sort of machined flat patch just to the left of where that blue dot is. That's the mark you want to line up with the gearbox housing. So once your ignition timer is all set up, it was retarded, so we've adjusted that. That has then dropped the idle down, so we need to adjust the idle using that little screw with a spring on it there. Once the idle is set down, we then need to adjust the mixture screw to get the mixture and the idle sitting nicely. So we've done that, and it is running a lot better. Finished doing our adjustments. What we wanted to do, we've gone through, as you can see, the wheel bearings and all running gear stuff, made the adjustments we needed to. We can focus on the engine, the go part, and yes, worked a treat. Sorted the carb out, nothing much wrong with that, just making sure the gaskets are tight. One of them was a bit dry, so you know that could have been a problem, but it's all done now. Changed all the vacuum hoses. As you can see, some of the vacuum hoses may look alright, and you might be able to blow through them and it's not leak out anywhere else, but remember it's a vacuum hose, so it's drawing air through it. So if it's weak and really soft, it's just going to close up and not get vacuum. So replaced all those, and we then set about the engine timing. Engine timing was pretty spot on, no need to adjust that, and we move on to the ignition timing. Now the ignition timing is the key part. So you want the spark to happen just that tiny section past top dead center. So you're getting that full explosion of combustion, pushing the piston down, turning the crankshaft, turning the wheels, putting smiles on faces. So the ignition advance is getting that right at the right point. If you got it too far off, which this was off, retarded slightly, the piston's already going down the cylinder by the time the combustion happens. You're losing valuable power, and it even changes idle. So I got the ignition timing set on this, just adjusted to where it should be, and the idle dropped right down to about 600 RPM. Shows you how far it was off. Then I had to readjust the idle, and then readjust the fuel mixture on the carb. So just because you whacked a carb on it, it does need a bit of tweaking. So rich in the mixture, a tiny bit on the carb. We've lost that flat spot. We're at 2,500 RPM now. It pulls, which is what we want to see from the videos. Flying along now, let's say flat spot 2 and 4. Again, 2,000 RPM, third gear. Put your foot down, boom. she picks up, she's away. Cold starts on the button. The only slight niggle we've got is warm stroke hot start. A few more turns here, like, fires up, no problems. That's going to be down to literally the fuel. You've got fuel pipes on the engine. Very bumpy road. So it's just me that fuel evaporating. So we'll have a check of that, see what we can do. Should be a one-way valve or a check valve in the fuel lift pump. So these haven't got a fuel pump, they've got a fuel manifold lift pump. So it runs off the auxiliary camshaft, pumps fuel. For 1.6, it's not bad. Bit of a joy to drive, especially in the beautiful weather. Lovely jubbly. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Any questions, stick them in the comments. I'm always happy to help. Cheers.